Good day, this is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Montreal, Canada for Reason to Resist on February 23rd, 2026. Last week, billionaire Les Wexner testified for nearly 5 hours about his relationship to notorious pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. The deposition was given pursuant to a subpoena issued to Wexner by the Congressional Oversight Committee. Now, based on publicly available information, there is no billionaire whose wealth was more closely tied to the fate of Jeffrey Epstein than Les Wexner. Wexner, who is currently reputed to be worth $9 billion US, engaged Epstein as his financial advisor, or that's how he described Epstein, for more than 20 years, beginning in the mid 1980s. During that period, Epstein held a power of attorney from Wexner and had vast control over Wexner's prodigious personal wealth. Epstein made hundreds of millions of dollars from his dealings with Wexner. Quite apart from Wexner's deep financial ties to Epstein, Wexner has remarkably close ties to Israel's political elite. In the 1990s, Wexner co-founded, along with Charles Bronfman, the Mega Group, an informal network of Zionist Jewish billionaires who made their mission to promote Israel's agenda in the United States. The Washington Times has reported that the Mega Group had a relationship with Israel's intelligence agency, the Mossad. In 2021, Vanity Fair published a detailed expose on the relationship between Les Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein. You can see the headline of that article up on the screen. It was titled "The Mogul and the Monster: Inside Jeffrey Epstein's Decades-Long Relationship with His Biggest Client." According to that article, the Mega Group hired Republican powerhouse political consultant Frank Luntz to advise them on how to advance Israel's cause in the United States. And according to the article, during the 1990s, both Epstein's and Wexner's profiles grew on the world stage. In 1991, Wexner co-founded what Vanity Fair describes as a philanthropic organization of Jewish billionaires. This is really just a very nice way of saying that it was an ultra-powerful Zionist lobby group, which according to Vanity Fair, used some of its vast resources to shape Middle East policy. In 2003, Wexner's foundation commissioned GOP messaging guru Frank Luntz to advise American Jewish leaders on how to rally support for Israel. That is the year in which the administration of W, otherwise known as George W. Bush, launched a criminal war of aggression on Iraq, which resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of innocent Iraqis. And Luntz's advice to this exclusive club of Zionist billionaires was, quote, "For a solid year, you should be invoking the name of Saddam Hussein and how Israel was always behind American efforts to rid the world of this ruthless dictator and liberate their people," as if the Zionist plutocrats who made up the Mega Group gave a damn about the lives of the Iraqi people. This past weekend, Reason to Resist published a report in which I highlighted the most stunning revelations from Wexner's deposition. That deposition, I forced myself to watch in full, by the way. That report that we published was titled Les Wexner, Israel, and Victoria's Dark Secrets. This report will build upon my initial analysis of the Wexner deposition, and in this report, I'll explain why I believe that Wexner likely perjured himself and did so, in my opinion, repeatedly. I'll also explain why I strongly suspect that the Congressional Committee which issued a subpoena to Wexner and whose members deposed Wexner is not serious about exposing the truth about Wexner's relationship to Epstein, at least not serious up until now. Whether it becomes serious will depend largely on how the public reacts to the ongoing revelations from the Epstein files. In fact, I'm tempted to say that Wexner's deposition was little more than kabuki theater. Before I launch into all of this, I just want to remind you that if you find this video to be informative, please like and share it. And if you're not already a subscriber to Reason to Resist, please become one and help us to expand the reach of our unapologetic resistance journalism. Now, at the outset, it bears repeating that I'm a litigator with more than 30 years experience in the courts of the United States and Canada. After starting my career As a banking and securities lawyer at the Wall Street law firm of Sullivan & Cromwell, I became a plaintiff's side class actions lawyer in Canada, focusing on securities fraud, and I sued dozens of public companies and hundreds of corporate executives over the course of my career in those lawsuits. I've deposed CEOs, CFOs, COOs, board members, board chairs, accountants from top 4 accounting firms, you name it, experts in financial analysis with doctorates from Ivy League law schools or universities. So my point in, reminding you of this, if you didn't know this background information, is not that my judgment is infallible. It certainly is not infallible, and it never will be infallible. It's simply that in analyzing this deposition and the overall legal context in which it's occurring, I do bring to bear a significant body of relevant expertise, and I think that that's something that ought to be borne in mind. Although, as I say, I could be wrong about this or just about anything. Now, the first question I want to raise today is this: why didn't the Congressional Committee on Oversight and Government Reform require Wexner to produce any documents? As I'm going to show you, Wexner repeatedly testified in his nearly 5-hour deposition that he could not recall the most basic facts about his relationship with Epstein. Although Wexner is 88 years old, the deposition left no doubt that Wexner remains lucid and is capable of remembering important conversations that he had more than 30 years ago. For example, he was able to recall 2 conversations he had with the notorious pedophile in the 1990s relating to Epstein's use of his connections with Victoria's Secret to lure unsuspecting minor females into his dens of depravity. So it took me some time, but I managed to locate the subpoena that the Congressional Committee issued to Wexner on January 8th of this year. And, when dealing with a witness like Wexner, who's likely to be very well prepared by his high-priced counsel and has a strong incentive to either lie or to profess ignorance about things which he, in fact, remembers quite clearly, it would be very important to have the relevant documents that are in the possession or control of this witness. That would enable his interrogators to refresh his recollection when he claims to not have one or to have a hazy recollection. It would enable them to fill critically important gaps, genuine gaps in his recollection, and it would enable them to establish facts which would show that Wexner is being less than forthright, perhaps outright lying, in a desperate effort to conceal incriminating evidence. So, as I mentioned, I did manage to find the subpoena, and I'm putting it up here on the screen. And as you can see from this subpoena, there's no serious question that the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform considers itself to have the lawful authority to demand the production of documents that are relevant to its investigations, because this appears to be a standard form that the House of Representatives uses for the issuance of subpoenas. It has a box. The very first box in the top half of the form is to produce the things identified on the attached schedule, touching matters of inquiry committed to said committee or subcommittee, and you are not to depart without leave of said committee or subcommittee. This box has not been checked for some reason, and there is no schedule identifying documents or categories of documents that Wexner is required to produce to the committee. So as I say, the form here amply demonstrates that the committee considers itself to have the authority to request documents, and it simply didn't exercise that authority in this case. And if you have any doubt that the committee is willing in some circumstances, including in the context of this particular investigation into Epstein, to use its authority to demand the production of documents, here is the schedule to a similar subpoena that the same committee issued to the Department of Justice to get the production of the Epstein files. And you'll see that the schedule identifies 7 precise categories of documents that the committee requires the DOJ to produce, including all communications relating or referring to Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell, and further relating or referring to human trafficking, exploitation of minors, sexual abuse, or related activity. All documents and communications contained within the case file regarding U.S. versus Jeffrey Epstein. That was the federal criminal proceeding brought against Epstein in 2019, and on and on. So there's really no question that the committee has the authority, believes it has the authority, and has been willing to use the authority. But in this particular case, it did not demand from Les Wexner, the billionaire who is most closely tied to Jeffrey Epstein, that he produce any of the relevant documents. Now, just imagine if the committee had issued a subpoena to Wexner, which was like the subpoena it issued to the DOJ and which required the disclosure of all relevant records in the possession or control of Leslie Wexner. Imagine if the committee had required Wexner to produce all his email and text exchanges with Epstein, all the audio recordings and video and audio recordings, if any, relating to his interactions with Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell or any of their alleged victims. Imagine if the subpoena demanded production of all documents Wexner has relating to Virginia Giuffre, who testified under oath that she was trafficked by Epstein to Wexner. This body of evidence would almost certainly be an evidentiary goldmine. From this body of evidence, we might, in fact, learn more about the Epstein scandal than has been revealed thus far by the very, very limited and highly redacted disclosure by the Department of Justice. Yet, for no comprehensible reason, the committee's subpoena to Wexner did not demand any of these documents. And to my knowledge, the committee has never demanded that Wexner produce such documents. As far as I can tell, there is no legal impediment to the committee issuing another subpoena to Wexner for the purpose of obtaining these documents. This investigation is ongoing. The fact that Wexner repeatedly claimed, as you will see, to have forgotten the most basic facts about his dealings with Epstein makes the production of these documents all the more imperative. Now, if you are a U.S. citizen, and I strongly encourage you to contact the Congressional Committee on Oversight and Government Reform to demand that they issue a subpoena to Wexner for all the documents I just identified. And just to simplify the task for you, I put it up on the screen here, the phone number to the Congressional Committee on Government Oversight, the one that is conducting this investigation, 202-225-5051. You can call them directly and ask that they urgently issue a subpoena to Les Wexner for all documents relevant to their inquiry into the Epstein scandal. And for good measure, you can send a message over X to the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee. They have their own X account. It's @OversightDems. Now, these are the characters who have been saying until they're blue in the face since Trump returned to the White House that they are absolutely committed to complete transparency in the Epstein scandal. So why don't you send them a message over Twitter, tag them in a post, highlighting the fact that they have failed for no good reason to demand full documentary disclosure from Les Wexner, the billionaire who was closest of all billionaires to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, let's get into the reasons why I believe that Wexner just flat out lied in his deposition. And I want to be clear, I'm expressing here my own personal opinion. I would need a great deal more disclosure from Wexner in order to be able to demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the standard of applicable in criminal proceedings, that Wexner in fact lied under oath. So I'm having to assess the veracity of his testimony based on limited information. And at the end of the day, I am expressing an opinion which is based on limited information. But for the reasons that I'll explain, I strongly believe that Wexner repeatedly lied while being deposed by the Congressional Oversight Committee. So let's get into the reasons why I hold that belief. The deposition began with Wexner painting himself as a simple man, a man of the people, a tycoon who came from nothing and who cared deeply about his employees. And here's what he had to say when he was asked at the outset of his deposition to summarize his business experience.
What degree did you graduate with?
Business degree.
And I know you had a long career, but can you briefly summarize your professional career for the committee?
Well, I was raised in a very poor family, and we had no money. And I had an Aunt Ida, and she loaned me her life savings, which was $5,000. And on the understanding I could put it in the bank, so it would appear that I'd have money. And I could borrow money from a bank, and I opened a store in 1963. And I opened a store every year for the next 5 or 6 years. And so by 1969, I had 6 stores. I took that company public, not to raise money, because it was remarkably successful. And I wanted the associates of the business to own a piece of the business. So I gave stock to virtually everybody that worked in the stores and the back rooms and cleaning people. I mean, I'm very proud of that.
He's very proud of that. He's so kind and loving with his employees. Well, people who worked with Les Wexner had a very different view of him. And I'm putting up on the screen here an excerpt from Vanity Fair's 2021 expose on Wexner and Epstein. And it reads, "Meanwhile, Epstein was driving a wedge between Wexner and executives at the Limited. Executives didn't understand why Wexner, a brutal boss and famous control freak, allowed Epstein such latitude. Les berated people. I once saw Les smack an executive on top of his head," a former Victoria's Secret executive said. "Les could be a complete asshole," recalled another former executive. "His favorite thing was to yell, 'You have shit for brains.' But with Epstein, he took a more sympathetic stance. Les would defer to him in any meeting. Les would put his hand on Epstein's shoulder." By the way, I've been involved in my capacity as a lawyer in an investigation into a corporation in which a CEO struck an employee in a moment of irritation, didn't wound the employee, didn't hit the employee in any manner that was substantially different from what's described in this article. And that CEO was terminated with cause. But apparently, in Les Wexner's world, that kind of behavior was acceptable. Now, also, when he told the committee about his fabulous success as a businessman, Wexner made no mention of his mother, Bella Epstein. According to Vanity Fair's 2021 expose on Wexner and Epstein, it was Bella who effectively ran the business for many years. And here again, an excerpt from the article. Wexner may have been CEO, but it seemed that his mother, Bella, was the boss. For 34 years, she served as the Limited's corporate secretary. A former executive recalled that Bella belittled her son in meetings when she didn't like his ideas. Quote, "It'll never work. Don't do it," Bella would yell in front of his staff. Quote, "I remember sitting there thinking, how dare this woman," close quote, the executive said. Les seemed to be terrified of Bella. According to Meister, and this would be Bob Meister, the insurance executive who in the 1980s introduced Wexner to Epstein, and I'll come back to that in a few minutes. According to Meister, Les would sometimes stay at Meister's house in Palm Beach so that Bella, whose Palm Beach house was near Les's, wouldn't know Les was in town. He was afraid of her. She was running his life, Meister said. So, as I mentioned, in recounting his gloriously successful and compassionate business career, Wexner made no mention of the all-important role of his mother, Bella Wexner. Near the outset of his deposition, Wexner was asked if he considered Epstein a close friend. Now, Wexner had a strong incentive to deny that he and Epstein were close friends. Why? Because close friends generally know a great deal about each other's private lives, and the private life of Jeffrey Epstein was one of rampant pedophilia. Predictably, Wexner denied ever being close friends with Epstein, and here is what he had to say on that subject.
You at any time ever consider him to be a close friend?
you know.
How often did you interact with Mr. Epstein throughout your relationship?
Probably a lot of phone conversations, but meetings, didn't see him much. You know, most of the stuff, I was traveling a lot because of business. So, and it was erratic. I mean, he might call 3 times in an hour and I'd talk to him for 3 months. That's how I remember it.
When you were interacting with Mr. Epstein, did you enjoy spending time with him?
Well, enjoyment was fun. No, it was work.
Now, in this exchange, Wexner doesn't really answer the question that he was asked. He was asked, quote, "How often did you interact with Mr. Epstein?" All he says is that his contacts with Epstein were erratic, and he even claims that sometimes they would not communicate with each other for 3 months at a time. Recall that Epstein had a power of attorney from Wexner, and through that power of attorney exercised vast power over Wexner's considerable wealth. In such circumstances, Wexner's claim that he and Epstein would sometimes go as much as 3 months, maybe even more, without communicating at all, is somewhat hard to believe. But the biggest problem with Wexner's claim that he never considered Epstein to be a close friend is the birthday note that Wexner gave to Epstein on Epstein's 50th birthday. And here it is up on the screen. It's handwritten, as you can see, January 20th, 2003. "Dear Jeffrey, I wanted to get you what you want, so here it is." And then Wexner drew a pair of breasts and concluded the note with, "Happy birthday, your friend, Leslie." When asked why he referred to Epstein as his friend in this birthday note, Wexner, who acknowledged that he in fact wrote it himself, simply said, "I don't know." Now, in his deposition, Wexner was never shown photographs of him and Epstein in which they looked rather friendly. For example, there's this photograph. Recall that Wexner testified that his relationship was strictly professional and he didn't enjoy his time with Epstein. This image appeared in the page after Wexner's handwritten birthday note in a book compiled for Epstein's 50th birthday. Given the similarity in the appearance of the man to the left of Epstein and Wexner, remember this is going back now to 2003, so obviously Wexner would have been younger. I think we can safely assume that this photograph, which appeared so close in the 50th birthday book to Wexner's handwritten note, is in fact Les Wexner. And if you ask me, the guy holding the champagne glass seems to be having a grand old time with his dear old friend, the pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. But that's not the only one, folks. There's also this photograph where Wexner, looking rather relaxed and debonair at some kind of a social event. Maybe they're at a polo match or they're watching some horse race, who knows? But that certainly doesn't look like work to me. Now, according to the 2021 Vanity Fair expose on Wexner and Epstein, Epstein took an unusually personal interest in Wexner's life. And in this part of the article, they report that Wexner's physical appearance changed after he became involved with Epstein. A former Victoria's Secret executive recalled Wexner dyed his hair, hired a live-in personal trainer, and adopted a new wardrobe. Quote, "Les would wear the tightest jeans you saw. I don't know how he didn't cut off blood supply to his private parts," close quote. This is from a former executive of Victoria's Secret. Wexner's colleagues referred to this look as chairman's casual. Yeah, all work and no play for Leslie Wexner. According to sources, Epstein took an interest in Wexner's romantic life. In 1985, New York Magazine put Wexner on the cover with the headline, "The Bachelor Billionaire." Wexner dated, but the relationships didn't tend to last. Around the time Wexner met Epstein, Wexner broke up with a Columbus woman. According to sources, Epstein showed up at her house with a multi-million-dollar check and told her to stay away from Wexner. The woman declined requests for comments. I don't know about you folks, but that does not sound like a strictly professional relationship to me. Had Congress required Wexner to produce all relevant documentary evidence in his possession or control, then we might have gained greater insight into the precise nature of the relationship between Les Wexner and Jeffrey Epstein. I very much doubt that Wexner would have been able to claim with a straight face that he was never close friends with Epstein had he been shown, for example, these photos and any other such material which happens to be in his possession or control. Now, another point of contention in Wexner's deposition was whether Wexner was ever warned by his friends and colleagues to stay away from Epstein. The Vanity Fair expose from 2021 detailed many such warnings to the Ohio billionaire. The article claimed, for example, that Bob Meister, an insurance executive who introduced Epstein to Wexner in the 1980s, soon developed many concerns about Epstein and shared them with Wexner on hundreds, I repeat, hundreds of occasions. Now, here is an excerpt from the Vanity Fair piece. It states, soon after introducing Wexner and Epstein, Meister started hearing disturbing stories about Epstein's sexual proclivities. Quote, think of whatever the worst thing anyone could do is, and Epstein did them all, close quote. That's from Meister. The breaking point came when Epstein showed up unannounced at Meister's Park Avenue apartment with 5 models. Remember, Meister is married at this time, for Meister's sexual entertainment. Quote, Epstein thought he was bringing me a gift, close quote, Meister recalled. And then Meister says, I told him, get the fuck out, and I never want to see you again, close quote. The article continues, Meister, whose estimation of Epstein had done a total 180, gave his friend a general warning about his character. Meister says he and his wife, Wendy, warned Wexner to stay away from Epstein. We begged him, don't get involved, Meister recalled. It was too late. Wexner had hired Epstein as his financial advisor. He thought Epstein was brilliant, Meister said. According to Vanity Fair, Meister warned Wexner, and so too did Meister's wife, about Epstein on hundreds, I repeat, hundreds of occasions. And here is an article or an excerpt from the Vanity Fair piece in which it is stated that in September 1997, Wexner celebrated his 60th birthday with a dinner at his Ohio estate. Meister says he used the occasion to once again tell Wexner how untrustworthy Epstein was. My wife and I told him, and Abigail, that would be Wexner's spouse, Abigail, a former Wall Street lawyer. They told them hundreds of times to stay away from Epstein. In front of guests, including former Senator Joe Lieberman and real estate developer Marshall Rose, Meister said he begged Wexner to sever ties with Epstein. Les wouldn't listen. Meister said it was the last time Meister visited Wexner's house. Now, I note here that Meister reportedly told Vanity Fair that he pleaded with Wexner in front of 2 people, and he even identifies who they are, Joe Lieberman and real estate developer Marshall Rose, which suggests to me that this man was telling the truth. If he was lying, if he was making it up, he wouldn't identify by name people who would have overheard the conversation and quite possibly remembered whether or not these things were said in that conversation. Now, in his deposition, Wexner was adamant that Meister and his wife never warned him about Epstein.
It reads, in September 1997, Wexner celebrated his 60th birthday with a dinner at his Ohio estate. Meister says he used the occasion to once again tell Wexner how untrustworthy Epstein was. My wife and I told him and Abigail hundreds of times to stay away from Epstein. Mr. Wexner, do you recall this occurring?
Objection, double hearsay.
Are you directing your witness to not, the witness to
No,
not answer the question?
no. I will direct the witness not to answer if that's my intent. I'm just raising an objection for the record.
I first need to understand this. I never had a birthday party for myself. In fact, I never had birthday parties. My mom and dad just didn't do that. And Abigail's been great because every milestone birthday has been a surprise party. And I think, I don't remember for sure, but the 60th birthday party, if Senator Lieberman was there and Marshall Rose was there, Shimon Peres was there, John Glenn was there, Max Fisher was there. And I don't think Meister was there.
Let me ask you a different
So
question.
he never said this. He wasn't there and never said this.
Let me ask you a different question, Mr. Wexner. Do you recall Mr. Meister and his wife repeatedly warning you to stay away from Epstein?
Never.
Now, I want to note a couple of things here. You just heard Wexner confirm that Senator Joe Lieberman and Marshall Rose were at his 60th birthday party in 1997. Back in 2021, as you will recall, Bob Meister, when he said he was at that party, actually said that he warned Wexner in front of those two of those individuals, Senator Joe Lieberman and Marshall Rose. So back in 2021, Meister recalled that those two people were at that birthday party. Now, maybe he found that out from some other source. He wasn't actually there, but it does support his contention that he was actually there because, as Wexner confirmed, the two witnesses identified by Meister, Marshall Rose and Joe Lieberman, were in fact at that party. Now, quite apart from all of that, the claim that he did not receive any such warnings doesn't really hold water because there are many other people who are adamant that they themselves warned Wexner about the unsavory Jeffrey Epstein. So here, for example, is an excerpt from the Vanity Fair article stating that Wexner's belated attempts to explain himself only raise more questions. Why, for instance, did Wexner not report Epstein's alleged $47 million theft to the FBI? It's actually now, as a result of the deposition, known to be an alleged theft of $200 million or more. He never reported it to the FBI. Or how could Wexner, says the article, claim to be blindsided by Epstein's duplicitousness? Quote, I told Les I wouldn't trust Epstein to cross the street. Why are you trusting him with your money, close quote, recalled Jerry Merritt, a former Ohio State Highway patrolman who served as the limited security chief for more than 25 years. Okay, so this guy was in charge of security at the company of which Wexner was the CEO, chairman, and founder for more than 25 years, and he told Vanity Fair that he was unambiguous in urging Wexner to separate himself from Epstein. And then there's this. The Limited's vice chairman, Tom Hopkins, told Wexner, according to sources, that Epstein was a con man. Wexner brushed aside the complaints, quote, Les thought he knew more than the people around him, close quote, a former executive said. And then we have more warnings, these ones coming from an individual by the name of Harold Levin. In fact, he plays a prominent role in the Vanity Fair expose. The article states that after working for Wexner for 7 years, Levin knew virtually every player on Wall Street. A few months earlier, Levin says he met with arbitrageur Ivan Boesky. This is an extremely well-known character from the Wall Street wild days of the 1980s. Levin's skepticism was confirmed as soon as he arrived at Epstein's Madison Avenue office. There were no visible signs of a trading operation, just Epstein sitting behind a desk that didn't even have a computer. Quote, Epstein was trying to explain a currency trade he wanted to do. I have an MBA from Ohio State and I didn't understand a word the man said, close quote, Levin recalled. Levin went back to Columbus and reported that Epstein was a fraud. I told Les, stay away from him, Levin remembered. Wexner agreed not to do the trade, but Levin was shocked when Epstein showed up in Columbus a few months later, announced Wexner had put him in charge of his finances. Levin tried to protest, but says Wexner wouldn't take his calls. Levin couldn't stand having Epstein as a boss. He was an asshole, the most arrogant person I ever met. And then the last paragraph, Levin said Epstein taunted him on his way out because Levin quit when he could no longer endure working for the notorious pedophile. And on the last day of Levin's work, says Levin, Epstein walked into my office and held up a piece of paper. He bragged that Les had given him power of attorney over his money. I worked for Les for 7 years and I never had general power of attorney. Epstein, Levin continued, even ordered him to surrender equity in Wexner's own town project, likely costing Levin millions. Epstein basically said, if you want, you can fight it out, but I have a lot of lawyers and I'll make sure it'll cost you a fortune. Later in the article, Levin recounts how his divorce, his marriage broke up shortly after that. I think he attributes that in large part to what he says were false allegations that Epstein was making about him. And he also says that years later, when the truth came out about Jeffrey Epstein, his ex-wife told him, Harold Levin, that he was right all along about Epstein. Now, I just want to comment on this statement that Levin made to Vanity Fair about not comprehending what the hell Epstein was talking about. Before I actually read this article in the Vanity Fair, before I knew about it, before I had any idea who Harold Levin was, I watched recently a hitherto unpublished interview that Steve Bannon did of Jeffrey Epstein. I'm going to try to do a report upon that interview, which came out in connection, I believe, with the latest document dump of the DOJ. I'm going to try to do a report on that because it's really something. But so before I read any of this account from Howard Levin, didn't even know who Howard Levin was, I watched that interview in good part. And in it, Steve Bannon is falling all over himself to, praise and express wonderment at the extraordinary mathematical abilities and financial acumen and banking expertise of Epstein. And as I was watching the interview and listening to Epstein try to explain the banking system, remember, I worked on Wall Street as a securities and banking lawyer. I couldn't make sense of a damn word that the guy was saying. I mean, some of it kind of made sense, but even the part that made sense, you could gain that knowledge just by doing some basic research on the internet. You didn't have to be a financial genius to say anything that Jeffrey Epstein said in that interview. And as I say, a good bit of it was just incomprehensible. You may also be aware, some of you, that recently an audio recording emerged of a conversation between Epstein and former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, in which both of them are struggling to spell the name of billionaire Peter Thiel and of the company that he helped to establish, Palantir, which is now deeply involved in Israeli war crimes and crimes against humanity, is probably surveilling us all in some way or another. But in any case, they couldn't even spell Thiel's name or even get Palantir right. So, and you can find countless examples of this in the Epstein documents where things that he writes are full of grammatical mistakes, spelling mistakes, and sometimes they're barely coherent. So this notion that this man was a person of extraordinary intelligence, mathematical capability, financial expertise, there's really no evidence to back that up. In fact, it is now known that Epstein, when he was working at Bear Stearns early in his career, lied to his employer about having 2 university degrees, and he was actually confronted about that and admitted that it was a lie. But they allowed him to continue working there for some time until he left under a cloud of suspicion. There's absolutely no credible evidence that Jeffrey Epstein was mathematically or financially brilliant. Did he author any peer-reviewed articles? Did he solve any hyper complex mathematical theorems? I mean, what did the man do in actual fact to demonstrate this extraordinary capability? I think the most plausible interpretation based upon the evidence that's currently available to us is that the billionaires who frequented him and paid him so much money, certainly Les Wexner was not the only one who gave a lot of money to Jeffrey Epstein. They have to come up with some song and dance about why they did that, why they gave him so much money. And the best story they've been able to concoct is that he was some kind of extraordinary financial advisor who deserved compensation that was far beyond what even the most well-qualified Wall Street tax advisors and financial analysts earn. So I think it's nothing but fabrication, but you can judge for yourselves by digging into Jeffrey Epstein's extremely checkered past. Now, imagine that the Congressional Committee demanded all records in Wexner's possession relating to his dealings with Epstein. Were the committee to have obtained those records, they might establish beyond a shadow of a doubt that Wexner received many warnings from friends and colleagues about Epstein. And you may be wondering, why is this important, whether or not he received these warnings? Well, first, and as I explained in my first report on the Wexner deposition, there's a mountain of evidence that Epstein repeatedly used his relationship with Wexner to lure minors into his traps. Wexner was the founder and CEO of L Brands, which owns Victoria's Secrets. Epstein repeatedly told young aspiring models that he was a recruiter for Victoria's Secrets. And once he enticed them into his dens of depravity with that claim, which may or may not have been true, by the way, he then proceeded to sexually assault them or to induce them, these minor females, into performing sexual acts on Epstein. If Wexner, in fact, received many warnings about Epstein but never acted on them, then Wexner could be found to be responsible in substantial part for Epstein getting away with this kind of behavior over so many years. Also, if Wexner received many warnings about Epstein over a period of decades from trusted advisors and friends, but continued to allow Epstein to manage Wexner's wealth, then that would raise an obvious and very potentially prejudicial question for Wexner. Why did Wexner continue to do business with Epstein despite all of those warnings? Was it because Epstein had compromising material on Wexner and was blackmailing him? Was it because Wexner knew that Epstein was an asset for the Mossad? Or was it because Wexner was himself a participant in and profiting from Epstein's child sex trafficking activities? To avoid such uncomfortable questions, Wexner claimed that he was simply duped by the brilliant Epstein and that Epstein was, in essence, the greatest con man who ever lived.
I think, I think he had, in hindsight, multiple personalities, incredibly smart, which I didn't really see. I mean, when you can bullshit Nobel laureates about physics and university professors and physicians and all the people that I've read about, I mean, if it was a movie, no one would believe it. I mean, but what I read about him and the connections is so, and I think that the perspective to understand it would be to understand how intelligent he was in his, as a criminal, and all the things that he did. And I mean, I have trouble imagining how he could just do all the shit that he did, forget about work, in a 48-hour day, because it was always so busy with my stuff. And then you find out all these relationships. It's just mind-boggling. And some of it, even today, I can't believe that it's so. But some of this stuff I believe because I read about it. I mean, stuff I read yesterday. I said, I can't fucking, pardon me, I can't believe this. And I think to understand it, the criminal activities, all this stuff, it's like, I hope you guys are really good. And I, as I said earlier, I hope, probably the dismay of my advisors to give you an accurate picture of how I am and how he was, how I perceived him. And I mean, diabolical isn't a big enough word. And I think I said early, Bernie Madoff was a Boy Scout compared to Jeffrey.
For those of you who don't know, Bernie Madoff ran for a very long time a multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme on Wall Street, rising to the very top of the financial hierarchy. I believe he was actually the chairperson of the NASDAQ at the time that finally his multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme was exposed and collapsed. And he ultimately went to jail despite his extraordinary wealth. There was a time when billionaires did go to jail, albeit rarely, but we seem now to be operating in a world where no matter what they do, they don't even get a parking ticket. Now, the other thing I want to say about this excerpt you just saw, when he said, well, it wasn't just me who got duped, all these other smart people, university professors, Nobel laureates, they all got duped. Well, let's assume that they in fact got duped. A big part of the reason why they did get duped is because Epstein's decades-long relationship with, this fabulously wealthy billionaire, Les Wexner, gave Epstein legitimacy. I mean, a lot of people just thought, well, if this guy who's worth $9 billion is giving Epstein a vast control over his personal wealth, the dude has to be both trustworthy and highly capable. So he himself, Wexner, bears significant responsibility for the fact that people got duped. But the other thing is, you don't actually know that these people were duped. They might have understood exactly what they were dealing with. And the reason why they had relations with Epstein is not because they thought he was trustworthy or that he was a genius, but because he could provide them with minors for sex, or he was an intelligence asset for Israel or for the CIA, and he had very valuable connections. He could put them in touch with people. He had the ability to get things done that weren't necessarily compliant with the law, and to do that with a high degree of secrecy. There may have been any number of reasons why these famous people, these highly accomplished people, these wealthy people had extensive dealings with Epstein that don't involve them having been duped into believing that he was fabulously trustworthy or capable. And so there are a lot of assumptions built into, unsubstantiated assumptions, I would suggest, built into Wexner's account of Epstein's dealings with other prominent individuals. Now, in this deposition, Wexner made other claims that I consider to be highly dubious or just flat out impossible to believe. For example, Wexner was asked a simple question about how he structured Epstein's compensation. And here's what Wexner had to say.
Mr. Epstein's compensation, how was he compensated for his work for you?
I don't specifically recall, but I would guess fairly.
That should be more clear. Was he compensated with salary, or would it have been investment-based or securities or fee-based? Do you recall what was the way in which you would compensate him?
I don't recall.
We discussed earlier, I think, that the breadth of his theft from you, I think, has been estimated by your counsels to be the hundreds of millions. Do you recall approximately what Mr. Epstein's total compensation would have been in his time with you?
I'm sure I would have known them, but I don't recall.
I just can't believe any of this garbage. Okay, he was a corporate executive for, of a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company for years. He routinely dealt with. I'm sure the CEO has to do this sort of thing, get involved in decisions about compensating other senior people in the organization, structuring compensation. This guy, Epstein, was his financial advisor for over 20 years, had a power of attorney, controlled his wealth, according to him, stole in excess of $200 million from him. And he can't even recall, just in basic terms, how Epstein's compensation was structured. He can't say, I paid him a salary. He can't say he was earning a commission. He had a profit sharing arrangement. Even in general terms, he can't say that. This is absolute nonsense. And the idea that he can't even ballpark his total compensation when he made so much money off of Wexner and caused Wexner so much grief, he can't even give an estimate of the total amount of money he made. That too, I find almost impossible to believe. I would suggest that Wexner is saying he doesn't recall these things because if he were to answer the questions honestly, the answer would raise further questions. Why did you pay him so much? Why did you structure his compensation in that way? And the easy way or the best way to avoid those questions is just say, I don't remember anything about any of this. Frankly, I just can't believe it. Now, it goes on from there. In his deposition, Wexner was asked directly about Virginia Giuffre. As I explained in my first report on Wexner's deposition, Giuffre was repeatedly abused when she was a minor by Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and other powerful associates of them both, including allegedly by Andrew, the brother of King Charles, who was just arrested, although not on sex crimes, alleged sex crimes, but something much less serious involving misconduct in public office. In any case, this was, I think, Virginia Giuffre, I think we can say safely, the most prominent of all the many victims of Jeffrey Epstein, did heroic work to expose the truth of this subject and tragically died last year in what the authorities claim was a suicide. And perhaps the thing that catapulted her to visibility more than anything else was the famous photograph of Virginia Giuffre when she was a minor, standing beside Andrew with her arm around his waist, and her allegation that it was Andrew was one of the powerful men who abused her when she was a minor being trafficked by Jeffrey Epstein. So Miss Giuffre, in a lawsuit begun in 2015, testified under oath that she had been trafficked to Wexner. And she gave that testimony more than 8 years before Wexner was deposed last month. And her testimony was under seal, however, until early 2024, so about 2 years ago, when a U.S. District Court judge ordered that the seal be lifted. And at that time, the world learned that Giuffre had testified under oath that she had been trafficked to Leslie Wexner. And here you can just see one of countless media reports about this. I picked this one because it's from the Columbus Dispatch, Columbus, Ohio, one of the more widely read local newspapers in that state, of which Wexner is the wealthiest resident and has lived there for decades and is basically an institution. So it was being reported in the Ohio press, not just internationally and nationally. I could give you countless examples of reports about Virginia Giuffre's accusation. Again, we're talking here about the most visible victim of Jeffrey Epstein, but this should give you a sense of how widely reported this was. Now, when asked about Giuffre in his deposition, here's what Wexner had to say.
Of who Virginia Giuffre is?
No. Familiar name, but I've heard it, but don't connect it to anything.
Did you ever have any sexual contact of any kind with Miss Giuffre?
No. How could I have contact with somebody I don't even know?
Miss Giuffre has accused you of performing sexual acts with her multiple times. You dispute these allegations?
She must be confused. No, it never happened.
Did Mr. Epstein ever bring up Miss Giuffre to you?
No, not a familiar name.
Ever mention Miss Giuffre giving you a massage?
No.
You got to be kidding me, man. So 2 years ago, it is widely reported in the state of Ohio, in the national US media, internationally, that the most visible, well-known victim of Jeffrey Epstein had testified under oath that she had been trafficked repeatedly to Les Wexner. And Les Wexner in January 2026 doesn't even recognize her name, has no idea who she is, maybe vaguely recalls something about this person. Look, think about yourself in the position of Les Wexner if you can. Try to imagine that it emerged a couple of years ago that the most visible victim of the world's most notorious pedophile had testified under oath that she had been trafficked to you. This had been reported in your local media, in the national media, in the international press, and you don't recognize the name of the accuser. I can tell you that if that's happened to me, if God forbid I should ever have to face an accusation of that gravity, not only would I remember the name of the accuser 2 years on after the emergence of the accusation, I would never forget the name of the accuser because of the immense potential damage that that would do to my reputation and to my life, an accusation of that nature. I just cannot believe that he did not recognize the name of Virginia Giuffre. And again, the simplest way of avoiding uncomfortable questions is saying that you don't recall anything about the subject about which you're being asked. The other thing I note about that excerpt that I just showed you, his responses to these questions, is did you note any indignation in his responses? Obviously, this is a very, very serious allegation, potentially devastating. I did not sense an iota of outrage, moral indignation about the supposedly false accusation that Virginia Giuffre had leveled against him. So that too, I consider to be rather telling. Now, in the interest of time, I haven't shown you every bit of Wexner testimony that I found to be dubious. I think there are plenty of other excerpts that reasonable, objective people would find difficult to believe. The point I wish to stress here is that there are many reasons to doubt what Wexner said, and that the best way of getting to the truth is to demand the production of all relevant records in Wexner's possession or control. Shockingly, the FBI and Department of Justice have never sought to question Wexner, even though the FBI considered him to be a co-conspirator of Epstein. And given that the Department of Justice and the FBI, which have been completely captured by the Trump regime, which is desperate to conceal the truth about Epstein, given that they have no apparent interest in questioning Wexner, it is all the more important that the House Oversight Committee exercise its subpoena power and obtain production of all relevant evidence in the possession or control of Leslie Wexner. And finally, before signing off, I wanted to share with you one other notable excerpt from Vanity Fair's 2021 expose on Wexner and Epstein. It's about Maria Farmer. And Maria Farmer is an American artist who claims to have been sexually assaulted by Epstein and Maxwell. According to Farmer, the assault took place at a property owned by Wexner that is situated in Ohio. And in the summer of 1996, before the assault happened, Epstein invited Farmer to stay at Wexner's 300-acre compound in a new community he was building in the state. She accepted the invitation after some hesitation. According to Vanity Fair, this is what Farmer said about her time at Wexner's property. Farmer was also unsettled by strange visitors coming and going at the house. she recalled government officials making pilgrimages to meet Epstein for unexplained reasons. What frightened her most, though, were the children. Farmer said she witnessed Maxwell escorting countless high school girls to meet Epstein, supposedly to interview for modeling jobs. Every afternoon, Ghislaine would run out saying, "I need to get the nubiles," Farmer recalled. Maxwell's attorney did not respond to a request for comment. Now, again, these things allegedly happened at a massive property owned by Les Wexner in the state of Ohio. Therefore, and I cannot stress this enough, we must obtain disclosure of all relevant documentary or electronic evidence in the possession or control of Les Wexner so that we can get as close as possible to the truth about what really happened at Wexner's property and in his dealings with Jeffrey Epstein. If Congress demanded all relevant records in Wexner's possession or control, then maybe we could finally get answers to these all-important questions and move far down the path to justice. This is Dimitri Lascaris signing off on February 23rd, 2026.